Today I'm gonna upload a Spring Boot application to AWS Lambda. I'm gonna create many endpoints and serve them all to my Lambda with an API gateway. AWS Lambda is a serverless service. This means that I can run a script with no server running 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. If there is no server, I don't pay. With AWS Lambda, I pay only per request and the time consumed by the request, but I pay only 20 cents per million requests. To test a simple backend for my personal project, it's the price I'm looking for. But usually a Lambda is mapped to a single endpoint. It has the context and event input parameters. And here I receive the information of the payload. But that's not the way I built a Spring Boot application. The first reason I want to use Spring Boot in Lambda is to have all the Spring dependencies. I want to easily connect to a database. I want to have the dependency injection and some many other Spring dependencies. And the second reason is that I want many endpoints to separate my logic. I want an endpoint to get all the vehicles, another endpoint to get the details of a single vehicle, and another one to create a new vehicle. So let's start by creating the Lambda in the AWS console. But first, click on the subscribe button to be aware of my new videos about many different topics on the development world. Let's first create the project, but this time I won't create it from Spring Initializer. Instead, I will use a Maven archetype. A Maven archetype is a pre-filled project. It's a pre-configured project to run on AWS Lambda. It has the main method, the handle request method to accept the Lambda request, and a proxy method to forward the Lambda requests to the web endpoints. I will use the Lambda archetype for Spring Boot 3 project, but there are plenty of archetypes to run on AWS Lambda. I'm gonna create the project using only IntelliJ. When creating a new project, I will choose Maven archetype, the name of the project, the SDK, I will choose 21, and here I choose the archetype, the catalog archetype, Maven Central, and wait until the archetypes are loaded. Now I start typing serverless. Here are all the archetypes available for AWS Lambda. I will choose Spring Boot 3 and hit on create. Here is my project created, but I have more files than when I create my project from Spring Initializer. Let's first take a look to the main class. It's quite the same as always, but instead of using component scan, it imports the controller directly to speed up the start time. Next to it I have another class, the Stream Lambda Handler. This one contains the handle request method, needed by my AWS Lambda. AWS Lambda needs a method to run the code. By convention, it's always named handle request. I will show it later when configuring that. And this other method is a proxy. It forwards the incoming requests to the existing endpoints in my application. I have to keep in mind that my Spring Boot application is proxified. And the last file is the template YAML. This one has the default configuration for AWS. It has the Lambda configuration and the events configuration of my Lambda. And as an event configuration, it uses an API gateway. But we will see it in more details later. Let's now create some endpoints in my application. Hello, controller. A REST controller as always, get mapping, hi, public response entity, message detail, hi. Let's create this detail into a package named details, record, string content, and I return response entity, okay, new message detail, hi. It's a simple controller as always in a Spring Boot application with the response entity and the get mapping. Let's create another one. similar, hello, hello, and hello. I can use the response entity object as in any Spring Boot application, even the dependency injection. That's a regular Spring Boot application. And now let's create the Lambda in the AWS console. In the AWS console, I go to the Lambda functions interface. Here I hit on the create function. I choose a Lambda from scratch. My Lambda name, Java Lambda. Choose the version, Java 21, and that's all. Create function. I wait until the Lambda is ready, and now go again to IntelliJ to build my project. In my project, I will compile it to obtain a jar file, even clean package. This generated me a target folder and inside a zip file, all the project into a zip file. Let's upload this one in the AWS console. Here I upload the zip or jar file and hit save. Before testing my Lambda, I have to configure the handle request method. Here is the default handler. Let's put my handler. I copy the package name and now the class name. String lambda handler without the controller, and the method is handle request. Save. Now I can test my Lambda. I go to the Test tab, and instead of choosing the Hello World template, I have the API Gateway proxy. Here I write my endpoint, hi, and the method get. Let's test this. And in the logs I see the content, hi. I could do the same with the hello endpoint. But let's now create the API gateway. I search for API gateway and create a REST API. I create a new one, my REST API, and leave the rest of the options by default. Create. I start by adding a new resource. At the source path, I add proxy plus. This way, all the requests received to the API gateway will be forwarded to my Lambda. I create the resource and create a method. Any method to the proxified resource will be redirected to the Lambda. I choose my Lambda, and that's all. Create the method. Here it is. I just need now to deploy my API. I choose a new stage, dev for development or production, and deploy. Here it is. My stage is now deployed and I have a URL where to test. Let's copy it. Now from the terminal, I can curl the URL with the endpoints, hi or hello. And if I write another one which doesn't exist, I have a 404 error code. That's all for this video. Hopefully the archetypes are there to help me create a pre-configured project. Otherwise I need to add the adequate methods and Maven dependencies to be able to run my Spring Boot application in AWS Lambda. If you liked the video, click on the like button, subscribe to my channel, and see you soon. Bye!